Okay, hello everyone. This is part two of the talk in Alien View. Unfortunately, I had to quickly run and handle something, so I couldn't finish the first part. I have to make this talk into two parts. So, anyways, welcome back, and I'm gonna continue. I started off by speaking about an alien view, as if being a sentence that has two implications: a viewpoint that finds itself alienated in causality in the cosmic landscape, and then view that is the extraterrestrial kind of leniency of imagination towards. What can I say? The emergence of consciousness upon our plane of existence. Human beings acknowledge the world in various dimensions. These dimensions have to do with the relationship of a subjective character in its own subjective interpretation of the world that is objective. So what I mean by that is that fundamentally I came to a point of recognition that I realized, just like I can observe objects, I also noticed that I can also observe subjects. And I noticed that subjects that are ascribed to phenomenology outside of me, for example, I look at this object in front of me and I have the word cup for it. Like there's a cup of coffee. So this cup of coffee, it's an external, it has an externalized kind of ideological presence for me. So what that means is, like, you look at your own body, it's an object you're being. You look at other objects, they're objects that you observe, which you are not being. Similarly, there are subjects which you are being, the ego, the sense of self, whatever you want to call it, the fruits of consciousness. So there's subjects that you identify with, and there are subjects that you don't identify with, yet both these are observable. So I was trying to find another mind to my mind, to wonder about the kind of impression I had got from the unknown variable, which can be said to be soul. The word soul is an unknown X factor in the equation. An unknown X variable in the equation of reality. It's either brain equals projection of reality, or it can be seen observer plus object and subjective observance equals reality. And so that observer will be the unknown factor. So anytime there's a mystery to the source of your being for yourself, reality can be more entertained as a the imagination is the person is more kind to their imagination, you can say. if we think that kind of Fermi's paradox tells us where are all the aliens in this universe, it's a big question in philosophy. There should be other civilizations here. Now, suggestions to this would be either the civilizations are in some sense in other dimensions, they're not visible, or in some sense there are no civilizations, or there are civilizations, they have graduated or evolved beyond an individual conscious representation of themselves in the cosmic landscape. So you see, right now I have a body. You can say your biological body is your membership into individual conscious activity in this universal sector. Without a body, a person cannot even center their ideology. There was a long time I was thinking, all right, so objects in the world have a gravity, but these objects that I imagine, my subjective phenomena, the subjective realm, what is the gravity? What is that? What force is influencing the subjective realm? And I eventually realized the codependency of the object of observance with the observer and the subjective observance with the observer. Language is kind of fascinating. It is like how this incredibly genius savant by the name of Daniel Talbot, I think. He had this incredible book, which I forget the book, I think it was called Numbers or something. And then in his book, this man said that he was young. And of course, Daniel Talbot is a guy who's memorized 10,000 digits of the number pi. He said that in some sense, he was walking home in winter and he saw the distance between two lampposts, like two light posts. And so he was trying this thing where he was going half of the way, and then while he cut the half into a distance, he went half of the half, and then he went half of that half, and then half of that half, and eventually he realized that the distance of the half of the half of the half of the measurement from one light pole to another, it goes to an infinitely tiny a percentage. So what that means is eventually the movements will become micro movements, and still it will not get there. You will still not get to the other side of the pole. So through division, we in some sense do get access to infinity. Through this sort of subjective infinitude, we never actually get to the other lamppost. Similarly, I kind of find the human being is dividing the moment into a sort of fragmentation of self and world, and because it has a fragmentation of self and world, it's like the distance between you and truth. The more it becomes storified, the more dualistic it is. The more something is dualistic, the ultimate endings, like the beginning and the ending, are not in the same moment. I find true intelligence is instantaneous, and it can only know its multidimensionality only in an instant. As if there's one point between two lines intersecting them, connecting both. So I find it's a division of subjective self, similarly to how groups of cells, a cell copies itself in some sense, becomes a greater organism. When it becomes a greater organism, it can reconsider the whole organism as another cell and copy again. Do you see? So when we realize there's a sort of endless manifest landscape, the human consciousness has to be very careful of how it defines the human being and where the boundaries of intelligence and the edges of reality and realism is kind of kept. Excuse me, guys, I'm feeling a bit nasally today. Hopefully, I can get through this talk. I find if there is a world, it centers around the vision that originates it. I find that we are conscious creatures. This consciousness is, in some sense, an evolutionary update. But as it is an evolutionary update, the realization and further experimentation into pose questions of the unknown, recalibrate knowledge in every exploration that is done. I find that an alien view is a suggestion that human beings are not ready yet to confront the unknown. And when a person in some sense becomes isolated in a system, they get to see the system in a way that those in the common center of it cannot see. So really think of it this way, that every moment of your life you have access to a common view and an uncommon view, but where you are in the landscape of your familiarity with conception and the designs of conception, well, that becomes a different kind of stroke and dynamic. I have wondered about extraterrestrial consciousness, but not through a metaphysicist, through the eyes of the physicist. And I have tried to wonder about how beyond the four dimensions there can be, in some sense, garlic. That's a incredible idea. So I want to thank the chat section for suggesting I take garlic. That's I know garlic is in Ayurveda. It's a very strong and powerful substance. Guys, my main fascination is simply this. We are human beings. We play with the human imagery. We wear it. We wear the idea of humanity as if it's our mind's clothing. Now, archetypes. Carl Jung managed, I think this is where we have to kind of bring Carl Jung in, because he attempted to create a map of the psyche, of the psychology of the human being. And so, of course, a part of psychology, it has to do with objective dimensions, objective laws, and maintenance. But another part of psychology has to do with the subjective sense of independence and a sense of cause and an ability to kind of, as you move similarly in your reality stuff around, you also have an ability to move the subjective significance of various phenomena. Your mind pretty much reverts back to a freedom that was there prior to language being learnt by the mind. When you were a child, like I personally have a memory before I learned language, like the memory is early, that I was just sight in a room. I could acknowledge phenomena. There was a sort of emotional response to the phenomenology of the room, but there was no discrete sort of linguistic pattern imposed on reality. What it is really what growing up, you can say from a youthful view, is in some sense the adoption and the carrying of certain patterns of intelligence. You see, when I was young, I remember I wrote an article. When I say young, I think I was like 12, 11, 12, something around that time. And I wrote this thing where I had understood, like I learned the word exception. And I remember I had wrote this thing called the exceptionist. And so it was this idea I had in my mind where it's as if a sort of archetype that in any situation it went, it suddenly was the exception, you know? And I wondered what could truly be an exceptional vision. And of course, this is not, at that time, I just remember writing a little thing about the exceptionist. But years later, I began to wonder about the uniqueness of how the man is treating the world and how the world is treating man. Now, something very interesting about how the world is treating man, there's two dimensions of it. One, it's an objective reality, and the other is a self. It's like the objectivity is subjectively translated. So that one is as if you're in charge of the meaning, and in certain parts of reality, you're not in charge of your meaning. You know, I have this concept where I say it's like some people you'll see they are the soul of that moment. I have journeyed through many moments in this lifetime, and in some of those moments, I have noticed as if if karma was, it was as if karma was whispering in my ear, just be an audience member now. You know, and I remember in that moment I knew that my intelligence had to be the background, you know. And then there were certain moments where literally the moment evoked me, and I was, in some sense, I became the soul of the moment, you know, where before I was just witnessing the soul of the moment. And so reality takes you into various places where efforts begin to be applied. Really what the mind is a type of movement inside another movement. Okay. Now really there's in the, I think, intellectual approach, there's two dynamics that is considered anytime there's a sort of mind body situation, either in some sense, or a self and world situation. Either the world is moving the self, or the self is moving the world. Now, when the self moves the world, we call that free will. When the world moves the self, we call that, if you're religious, you call it divine will. If you're non-religious, you call it the laws, the unknown laws of the cosmos. You know? So we have to understand we are creatures of sight, and we are designing our sight. And our sight's design is based on how far we can see. That means when someone can see the answer, like you can see the destination you're driving to, but you're not at the destination yet. But you can see behind your eyes, you are certain that you will be at the destination. That certainty arises because you are seeing the potential. So it's kind of this thing that it's not just like problem and then jump to solution. It's kind of like problem and then a problem that doesn't see its solution, then a problem that sees its solution, the solution is in its proximity, then the How does attention be thought and matter at the same time? How do the various dimensions of meaning that we conceive as an individual on this planet all project simultaneously? How is life alive? This question is so important that our humanity is based on it. Anytime human beings stop wondering about what they are, that's a dangerous moment. That's a moment where it's as if, like you see, we think we are purely objective beings. We feel our subjectivity is a hallucination in this objectivity. We feel atoms are hallucinating humanhood. Okay? But we have to consider that humanity is a multidimensional position. Even the concept of it, even the story of the world has various dimensions. So when we realize the external meaning will always be multidimensional because objects are empty and it's the attention that imbues meaning, I can tell you that there were certain states of mind that I experienced that if I did not have trust in the moment, the state of mind would not advance. And I find when a person understands something, it's easier for them to trust it. When you understand how something works, you won't be bombarded by the unexpected suddenly. Man is creating, like the free will's purpose is to say I am here before the world is. The world's purpose is to remind man that it's here before man is. It's fascinating. There is so much that has happened, that is happening, and will happen that in the immediate moment of conscious reception in the waking state, it's not accessible. So what it is that I think many philosophers understood this, starting from the Greeks and even stretching to certain European philosophy, that the world is very vast. And this vastness will render knowledge hollow. That means the more we know, the bigger the playing ground becomes. So the more we don't know, actually, the more we know. So there's actually a sort of ironic thing that occurs in the pursuit of knowledge, that the more you know, the bigger the landscape is, so the less you know. But the more the world can get articulated easier. For me, when I speak about something, whether it's looking at an object or whether it's looking at a subject, the designer's mentality is seeking to explore and extract dimensions from the phenomenology. So you see, for example, for me, I have this mentality, and it may sound a bit odd to some audiences, but before I actually entertain a story of self, my moment is active design. I live like a designer, and then in certain moments, personality evokes. That means, I'll be honest, like after some point, it's like based on how long and how far you look at something, the meaning of that thing looked at will inevitably change. So what I'm saying is, just like how man is evolving throughout history, his ideology is evolving. But because thought and the subjective realm, the subjective component to the moment, I personally say moves at a speed faster than the objectivity. That means our thoughts are changing faster than the objective realm. That's why we feel the subjective realm is moving faster than the objective realm. That's why we can feel we're living. That means our minds are running quicker than our bodies, and they're leading the embodiment in some sense. So we have to kind of notice, though, I think the alien that mankind, our species, should wonder about should be the unknown. The alien is the unknown archetype. The alien is like a personalization of the unknown, the same way that God was also the early attempt of humanity to personalize the unknown, to personify the unknown. Okay, so the extraterrestrial is a personification of the unknown. That means when man does make, let's say in the future, contact, imagine, as you see in the wallpaper I've chosen, imagine these extraterrestrials kind of made contact with people on Earth. The first thing that would be acknowledged would be that the human species would be unfamiliar to the way these creatures are expressed. So we not only need a contentment with various expression, and really before any sort of extraterrestrial contact, there should be the designer's content through the void found by human beings. That means if you want life to be in a certain way, it will be very difficult for you to see it in other ways. But if you don't want life to only be in a certain way, you are kind of piloting in the moment and noticing various situations require various responses, then life is not lived with this kind of tank-like mentality. What honestly, I do comprehend the necessity of hard work, but sometimes when I see people promoting hard work, they're not promoting working smart. So they're saying work hard, but don't, like, they're not making any suggestion about working smart. And the issue about working hard is kind of saying there's a universe of billion trillion stars, yet the person only wants one subjective angle from it. It's like life is too vast. We are more like tourists in manifestation, as if many things in life have not been seen by your eyes. Life is one of those things that some people say if you make it too complex, it will become meaningless. If you make it too simple, it becomes meaningless. And some people say if you really even maintain balance for eons, the balance will become meaningless. Eventually, it is novelty and the voice, the freedom of the inner realm. I see no purpose to existence aside from the tools given in the hand of the moment. Do you know that was a very profound thing? Because when I was younger, I was a very shy, silent, quiet kid. I've always found it a bit of like in crowds of people, I get a bit overwhelmed simply because when I conceive of all the points of attention in the room, I can't, like, literally, there's some moments in life where you look at that moment and it's like the complexity is going ad infinitum. There's some moments in life you see it, it's so simple that it's like there's the pleasantness of the aftermath before the action is even done. So realities differ. The human state of mind has various options to consider in regards to extraterrestrial contact. I often say in these talks that really what united humanity, all the separate nations fighting on the turf, was when something else came on the turf. For example, in the movie Independence Day, humanity was like, okay, this isn't just for us, this is for everybody on the planet. We're fighting for everyone. There was a sort of instant unity, as if the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So people fighting with each other, nations fighting with each other, suddenly see an extraterrestrial invasion unites them. So I now don't consider the extraterrestrial invasion that significant. What I consider significant, at least from that kind of story, archetypal position of the story, is that humanity will unite in the face of a common aim. So really, that one language that is going to unite us is not going to actually be a language, it's going to be a challenge, a collective challenge, something that if the species does not discover the efficient vision of its collectivity, it will in some sense never be able to bring it about. That means the next great artworks of the future generations are not individual actions, they are collaborative mental fields. Now, instead of seeing Again, that extraterrestrial force invading humanity to lead that unification. I find that we all, playfully I'm saying this, we all have an enemy that is like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The unknown that I have to confront is also similar to the unknown that other human beings that can confront. The orchestration of knowledge, the moment's manifestation, the moment's ability to flow. The unknown is the unification of all knowledge. The unknown is attributeless. The known has attributes. That's why it can be known. So if man's psychology is now reaching a realm of study where it's wondering about the attributeless, it means a lot of education, systems of education and their intentions will have to confront the emptiness of their field. That branch of knowledge has to acknowledge its emptiness. Mathematics is a conscious branch of knowledge because it acknowledges zero. But many fields of knowledge, they cannot stand. It's literally like a purification process. If the educational system was lead and we were an ancient alchemist wanting to turn it into gold, the branches of knowledge that don't acknowledge emptiness, they will all get purified, like the purification process will get rid of them. Because really in life, you have two eyes. Another suggestion, there's two modes of being. There is a mode of being where there's something in the empty, or there's emptiness in the something. Now, the issue with a purely materialistic approach is that it doesn't allow the emergence of greater potentials of the mind. Einstein was in a post office, and the idea came to him in some sort of abstraction of him moving at the speed of light, him moving inside a light beam. So Einstein's mind asked a question that his mind had never asked before, and the answer to that question became a very loud response. And as he wrote E equals mc squared, and he wrote general relativity and super relativity, he wrote those two essays and presented it in the journals. Eventually, this man gained a recognition for his imagination's contribution to the normality of reality. That means it's like science bashes the imagination of the religious because it is not in accordance with reality, yet many scientific explorations have only come about due to abstract fields of wonder. That means Newton wondered something. He looked at the world, his eyes were open, he wondered, and then something new he saw. You know, I'm speaking like Yoda here, I don't know why, but do or do not, there is no try, you know. Yoda says that, by the way. Humanity will always be fascinated with what is beyond its standard of expectation. Now, I have this mentality where I'm like, just to prank the future, just to, in some sense, prank my future grandchildren, you know. Even though they won't ever know, the future generations of humanity, is that I'm going to, like, I got this idea that what if if my mind could see a better humanity, why don't I live with that subjective significance rather than making the objectivity more significant? That means morality is a conscious activity. Caring for something. What does that mean? That means you not only care for the objective continuity of the phenomena, but you also care for the clarity of the subjective representation of that object in the linguistic simulation behind your eyes, the way your intelligence animates reality. Now, the philosophical approach has certain requirements. To be honest, I'm one person speaking in a universe of a billion trillion stars. I am in no way trying to give people answers. I'm trying to take attention to the questions. I think we literally, history does this kind of up and down thing where certain civilizations have to look at the answer, they want answers, certain human beings, and certain human beings want to find the right question to ask. You know, to some people, finding the right question to ask is more significant than the answer, because the right question is saying, okay, so how should I look at this? One has to ask, is freedom an objective thing only, or do the seeds of the roots of external freedom, are they do they originate within? Like that should is if, would the person wonder about that? I don't know. I have sometimes I feel that I oscillate between moments where I am identifying with certain objects and subjects as if the attention is piloted there. The whole plane of existence is meaning is being extracted from where the attention is in regards to objectivity and subjectivity. In some moments, there is no story. It's as if it's a part of you that has no history. It's a part of you that is not linguistically trapped by its own expectations. I think the main thing that I'm trying to say is that we can say that human beings, if their language evolves, the imagery they acknowledge and accept will also evolve. Now, the thing is that any new introduction to the system, I find, will inevitably get tested by the whole system. That means any idea that is really loud, it will be seen more, and therefore it will be responded to more. You see, nobody is stupid in an emergency, or their intelligence tries to max out its survival continuity. So, in an emergency, the importance of action is real. But in moments where there's not an emergency, when life is not important for the person, then living also doesn't become important. You know, the thing is that the spiritual perspective may misleadingly direct people to a sort of escaping the objective realm. But for me, that sort of spirituality is a spirituality of a savage time. You know, there was less to do back then. So there was more reasons to escape the boredom of the common manifestation. Every generation in history has its own voice and therefore is its own response. I learn from life every day, guys, in strange ways, in multidimensional ways. The mind exists to see, sight exists to be, being continues to do. Doing and becomes specified or specialized in regards to an active sense of doer. I don't know how to say this, but like, it's not that you just in the morning turn on the keys to your car to go to work. You also turn on the ideological existence of who you are and what you value in the moment. So the consciousness dresses up in a sort of subjectivity for the day, you know? And when you find a bit of distance between you and the linguistic simulation, the language, the realm of language, you know, the world of language, you in some sense find a freedom of choice. Your choice is, you don't just have choice in doing things, you also have a choice in how you see the value of how things are being. And that inner choice has been avoided because they don't teach children about the mind. Biology is devoid of psychology, and psychology has to acknowledge a field of intelligence that it goes beyond rational fences. I do want to share as much as I can in this talk about various viewpoints. Various points of view. I've looked at the concept of the extraterrestrial through, and there's one view, for example, which I found this to be fascinating. That did you guys know that there was a point in history where the only thing that survived a sort of natural disaster was on a very cellular level, was on a, like, as if a sort of bacteria continued, do you know, a sort of apocalyptic reaction. So it's as if, like, intelligence, regardless of what happens on earth, the cells of the human innovation, they will be carried, as if, like, we have to consider the debris of one planet is coming to another planet, as if planets do have an influence. Even planets communicate with one another, but their communication through a mineral content, through an elemental approach, as if a sort of intelligent cells from the surface of one planet could potentially drift off into the surface of another planet and rendering intelligence. So there is a view that we are actually the extraterrestrial on this planet, because on a cellular level, the origination of the uniqueness of the ability of the cell to even replicate, it comes from, in some sense, an extraterrestrial source. Right, so it's like our cells are extraterrestrial, but we've been raised on this earth, and kind of like this, the tiny cell was like a seed planted in the soil of this earth, and this cell came, this alien extraterrestrial cell, or whatever, came from like space debris, like literally dust from one object falling onto another. Okay, so there's that mentality, right? There's a mentality which I got introduced to, which I found it very fascinating, and my inner realms tend to lean towards this sort of framework more intuitively. And it was the story. It was how in ancient Vedic culture, I believe they saw 14 dimensions to the world, and the seventh was the human existence, right? The plane of human existence, and there were seven above this, okay? And so these seven realms above this, at the top of these realms, okay, and they saw this, that the seventh realm was on the top of Mount Meru, okay. These are works written in these are ancient Vedic thought inspired out of the writings of Rishi Vyasa, Ved Vyasa, who is this being is incredibly important to me, at least. You know, there have been times where I have felt I have lived through his eyes in some sense. You know, and the thing is that where was I going with this? Oh yeah, Mount Meru. Mount Meru, on the top of it was the higher plane of existence, right? Beyond this, right? So beyond the stages. So it's as if, think of Earth having 14 parallel dimensions, and human existence is the seventh dimension, and the other dimensions begin like a mountain, as if human existence is at the bottom of the mountain, of this divine mountain, and beyond it, those seven dimensions are known as the lokas. And the ultimate one is Brahma Loka, where the ultimate intelligence of the universe is being here, as if that's the throne of universal intelligence. Okay, Brahma Loka. That means right now, me and you are Brahma's imagination, in some sense, you know, based on this Vedic thought. Now, the top loka is, hopefully I can remember this correctly, it's the Brahma Loka is the highest dimension, okay? So it is where Brahma is, the reality of the ultimate. Then it goes into lesser frameworks, and I believe, oh gosh, I don't remember, of course, the names, but it's another loka, and oh, I got it. Underneath Brahma Loka were the beings who were perfect embodiments of knowledge. They were ultimately realized, and they were pretty much, you can say, like the archangels of meaning. You know, so underneath the Brahma Loka, it's kind of like the archangelic, right? The archangelic is ultimate's representation. So they are kind of like the beams of this ultimate sun that Brahma is. Okay, so the beams of it, right? Now, so I guess I would say beings that are the avatars of knowledge, the avatars of reality. So what that means is man's relationship with knowledge is that it's lifeless and it's an interpretation, a storytelling upon an inanimate world. But in this view, knowledge, knowing, the streams of knowing that exist, these are avatar-like positions. Okay, in Vedic thought, at least in my view. So where I'm going with this is that after beneath that is sorry guys, I don't want to do injustice to this, and I gotta say this again. Let me just Google this. But it's fascinating, guys. I'll tell you the overall relationship and pattern I saw in it. Like, I'll tell you why I feel this is okay. Here, seven lokas. That could be a song, guys. And guys, you got to see these dimensions in an onion sort of multidimensionality, by the way. Onion style multidimensionality, guys, you know. Oh, man. Hang in there, guys. Hang in there. Okay, guys. I think I got it. What are these names? All right, guys, I finally found this, so I'm going to explain to you again more properly now what I mean by the lokas and what is meant by them. So there is, in some sense, what is the name of it? Oh my God. Sorry, guys, just hold on. All right, guys, my apologies again, but I think this is worth the wait. So here we go. The first one, the first loka, the highest loka is actually called Satya Lok. Okay, and this is it's kind of suggested it's like the supreme consciousness exists here in this dimension, free from birth or death. Underneath this is a dimension known as Taploka, and in this dimension, this is where just a second. Okay, this is this is where, in some sense, the world is inhabited by immortal beings, and these beings are like avatars of knowledge, representations of knowledge, you know, personified universal values, you know, or qualities, you know. The archangels are similar examples, I find, in an Abrahamic parallel, you know. So, and it said that these beings can access higher realms very easy, you know, with greater ease. That means it's like these beings underneath the ultimate dimension can access the ultimate dimension any point. They are free from what is rejected to the lesser dimensions in some sense. Now, underneath Taploka, there is Jan Loka. And Jan Loka is, think of it this way, from the top of a mountain, we're coming to the bottom of the mountain where human dimension is. So the peak of the mountain is the supreme consciousness. The second kind of way down from the top is, in some sense, where avatars of pure knowledge exist, personifications of truth exist, and they can, in some sense, dissolve in the ultimate at any time. That means they are in tune with their inseparability of will. Now, underneath this is the realm of realized beings. In Jan Loka, this is where the kinda enlightened, those who may not be the truth, but are aware of some sort of realness here in this existence. So then, and it suggested that these are souls who have completed an unhindered access to the material world. So there are, in some sense, how can I tell you, beings in this dimension, in this third dimension, they have seen the games of materiality. They are beyond material existence in another way. The games of material existence. And it's, check this out, in this dimension, in this third kind of dimension, down from the mountain of these parallel worlds, they say that the beings in this dimension, they can travel to any place in the world with the speed of thought. So what that means is, if the guy is, it's like instant teleportation. It's still as if they're beyond material limits. So then, underneath this is Maharloka, the abode of great rishis and sages. And as it says, these are beings who through long periods of tapasya have become greater than the devas themselves. That means they are beings who, even though in a more rougher scenario, they still can see the truth in a way. So what it means is like the person in the darkness can see the light in a way the person in the light cannot, you know, the person near into the light cannot. So these are beings who they are further away from the truth. That's why they get to see it with a certain clarity. Okay, but it's not the ultimate. It's like only through long states, like these tapasyas they talk about. I consider them as kind of long, like long vacations into being a pure mind rather than an embodied moving body. So anyways, underneath this is Svarg Loka. And this is a world that's, as the reference says, this is a world that is often mistakenly assumed to be heaven. So before we reach human existence, there's another world there. So it's the fourth kind of dimension in Vedic thought, you know, from the top speaking, you know. Sorry, not fourth, sixth dimension. So it's as if this world is assumed to be heaven. However, check this out. This is where deities like Indra exist. And it says it is also home to various sages and Gandharvas. I think Gandharvas are just like outsiders, you know. And then, guys, we have our current plane of existence. And something interesting that's spoken, this is like the main kind of point of this, guys, that it's not just 14 dimensions, but it's each dimension has infinite parallel dimensions of its own. This is acknowledged. There is an infinite extension. So what it means is the cosmos is the manifestation of infinity, but with a certain peculiarity that makes man, regardless of what his free will does, wonder how the cosmos is moving. Some scientists wonder, astrophysicists especially, wonder if the world is comprehensible or it's maybe not comprehensible yet. That means the limits of our knowledge is being questioned by the ultimate view. And so when we wonder about the limits of our perception, well, subjectively we consider that we are like a grain of sand on an infinite beach. My voice is a grain of sand on an infinite beach. I consider it so. It's as if this person who wrote Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, he in some sense wrote that it's as if we take a handful of sand from the world and we call this our awareness. That means who you are, what the person can be defined as, is a sort of intelligent space that has been, its ideology and psychology has been sculpted by the experiences it has been exposed to. Okay, so guys, I was looking at the chat section. Thank you for the kind words, Orion Rose. Let me tell you what I think is like the main idea I'm trying to get across. You see, we can either in our personal truths, in our personal dimensions, we have freedom to choose what the world means. In our external dimensions, we don't. We don't have freedom ultimately because there's the laws of nature, there's the cosmos, and therefore in no way am I telling people, yo, there's something spiritual, go look at it, that be making them avoid what is here now. Let me tell you, the most spiritual thing ever is just the fact that there's something rather than nothing. It doesn't get more spiritual than that. And so it's a relationship of phenomenology with itself that in the realms of the free will, it can self-dictate, but itself only exists because it has seen a world. So for me, it was like the difference. I asked myself, all right, what has changed from me when I was a kid till now? And I realize it is the sophistication of dimensions that I see upon phenomena that can be filtered by what is familiar to me as a pattern. That means there's been some things I've looked at in life and I literally, my attention could not penetrate into any sort of vision of that phenomena. It's like I was looking at a statue like a statue, you know? And there's been moments where I've looked at something as if I could totally see how the finger, with what motivation the finger of that author moved the pen, do you know, from long ago. So you see, it's all about opportunity and access, and eventually the fruition. I call this the fruition of the individual life, that you realize, okay, I lived for the self, for this. I've been self. Imagine like this is just an average thought that the person's like self-obsessed. The person's saying like, okay, I've been obsessed with my self-success, but don't I realize that the self is codependent, connected to the world where that self extracts value? That means a failure of your species is a failure of the individual. And when we get that level of sensitivity, it's as if it doesn't, it's like you'll realize it's as if the person traveled to the higher dimensions, went up to the higher locus, and went to all the beings there. And it's like, I'm here, guys, I'm here. And all the beings in the higher locus were like, why are you here? It's like you're meant to be down there, go back, you know? And so it becomes one of those situations where you don't escape. Evolution is not about, I mean, in some sense, yeah, the animal had to run away from earthquakes and volcanoes, but like, but on some level, it's not, you don't try to escape life anymore. You just trust the fact that existence, nature exists. There's something profound about that sentence. I don't know how to say it, but there's a way that nature communicates to the human being that has to do with just how gentle and conscious the being is of the simplicity of nature. It's really where Taoistic thought goes there, you know? Of course, Hafez would say the words we speak become the house. The words you speak become the house you live in. So please, guys, entertain the fact that I'm sharing these ideas. I'm just painting subjective landscapes that are trying to as close to represent a sort of inner experience I'm having in the moment, right? And this whole thing about the inner outer, of course, whenever subjectivity comes into place, objective truth feels less like it's, sure, some things you need objective evidence for, but some things, if you don't have even the idea, the language for, you can't even say anything about it. Do you see? It's as if our hands are cannot enter certain dimensions, even though we can acknowledge them being there. The relationship of man, the human, with the extraterrestrial, it's following a dualistic axis of the known and the unknown. So really, for me, anything that is unknown, it's just unknown to my intelligence, So it doesn't mean others don't know about it. It doesn't mean nothing exists. It just means that my moment when I'm looking at something, I don't see that pattern. I see a different pattern, right? I find our eyes, if like there's, see, think of it this way. Imagine a person sitting, one person in a room having 10 thoughts, or 10 people in a room by just the nature of looking at something, each of them with the uniqueness of their own eyes. Suddenly we have 10 worldviews. So rather than one person sitting and thinking of like 10 worldviews, it's as if 10 worlds are viewing one moment, right? So in our inner relationship has to be respected. We got to start becoming samurai for the writer's inner voice, like with a sort of honor to the level of the samurai. We gotta bring forth a sort of movement of honor and bushido in the educational system. And by bushido, I'm just saying we see what those guys did, see what we can use, and go further from there. I'm not saying like people have to all be as solid with such as the thing with honor is that the more honor you have, the less wrong you feel. So the more inner authorization you have, the more expressive you are. So you can say the difference between in all history, the difference between the hierarchical strength systems of various tribes or groups of species, or there was one line that was the leader of the pack and the leader of the pride, the pride of the pride, and so that one line, there was the moment it became a sort of alpha position, there came a beta position. So what does that mean? That means a kind of power dynamic, okay? And so you see the alpha had more inner authorization based on experiential sculpture of the worldview till that moment in life. You see, the thing is, most people are trying to be like others. I just see this from the entertainment industry. The amount of people in downtown areas of cities that are dressed similarly. It's like there was this guy named George Patton where he said, if everybody is thinking the same, then nobody is thinking. If everybody is just trying to repeat one pattern, then there are not new patterns emerging. I have no idea how much the human being should care for the future. I just know that after 4 billion years, there's a civilization here, and it's like we can't just not attend it. So what that means is the ultimate resolution of the individual value of life becomes to find a collective value. So imagine children in the world opening their eyes, and instead of going into some sort of, okay, I'm just gonna hedonistic self-gratification loop, they just, instead they come out and they see that there's a world here that needs them. And you see, it's like we got to have this approach that so many people, it's like until you ask them, they won't do anything about it. So the thing is that most of the world is waiting for, I call this is the overall savior psychology, and it's pretty much hope. What hope is that something else does something. It's the future is a tricky projection because it can totally dismantle the emotional stability of the present moment. And of course, fear is important to the psychology of the human being. You might not believe it, but many in the Abrahamic texts, fear of God is the start of wisdom. And you would say, why? Because fear of God, you fear what you're really paying attention to, okay? So if your fear is something you pay really close attention to and you're trying to stay away from, that means you have hyper attention towards that fear. So the fear of God would be the hyper attention to God, which would be a resolution, at least in the Abrahamic context, in the Abrahamic religions, a resolution that my free will is not the chess master's hand, it's the pawn. So when you have that mentality, it's kind of semi-dangerous. Because you are allowing a certain ideological architecture to define your limits. So it's like, it's like some people don't like people telling them what to do. Well, guess what? Some ideologies have been telling you what to do, and they have been kind of accepted as in the child condition, in the conditioning, as if your parents did not just spoon feed you. Your culture, your civilization, your environment, every story that has entered your ear has fed you reality. So do you see what I mean? The world is no longer that simple, everybody happy kind of place. The world has become an advanced command for the civilization to attempt an effort that is once in a lifetime. And I'm just sitting here and realizing, whoa, 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 how much creative potential is being ignored because human beings are trapped in what I would like to call economical survival conditions. You see that the system is that we have to work to get something. I understand this. But the thing is, in order to work to get something, that is the occupation. So it's like there's a tension through the human life. I don't know how to say it. It's like more than you're just a character in a story, you're a tension moving around in your conscious states. Some people even move around in their dream states. Like I remember I was with a girl who of course for a short time, but we were close. And so when I she told me she moves in her dreams, and I sat there kind of fascinated like a psychologist that has heard something that could be an oblivion to the access of rationality, you know. And she told me she moved in her dreams. And I was like, did you move in your dreams or did your dreams move? I didn't say it like that. What I told her is that I asked her a question about what she feels the purpose of the soul is, and she told me it's power. She told me that the only reason she cares about spirituality is because it's empowering her, because it gives her power. And I realized the ego is being avoided. What that means is self-certainty should be a percentage of the vision of the moment, not the whole of it. Because really, we want to see the new. For me, if somebody wants to show me a movie like in some sense I've seen before, I'll be like, okay, if I can see a movie, this is why I never watch like a movie again. Like even if I do, it's not by my will, you know. The reason is because there's too many movies to see. And what that means is, does the mind want to repeat a pattern? You know, I mean, I could totally understand. Like, I remember seeing at least. I mean, I can't make the sentence absolute, but like, man has an emotional relationship with the world that he sees in the world. The subjective realm is so profound. Ultimately, we are just creatures on a rock and sight in the void. Do you understand like what that means? That means we can't expect much from something that we are responsible for creating unless the effort arises, right? So many people in life are living a conditional existence, and of course you'll say like if I was hearing this right now, I would probably think like, okay, but the biological existence is incredibly conditional. If I don't eat, for example, the body it moves towards inefficiency. If I don't sleep, it moves towards inefficiency. If I don't maintain survival somehow, it leads to inefficiency, right? So in some sense, we have to respect external conditions. But when it comes to wondering about the scope of perception behind our eyes, really what's happening behind our eyes is how in front of our eyes is translating into subtler imagery. So as if imagine you're in a room right now where only you can see what's in that room. And guess what? That's what imagination is. The nation of images that your conscious experience can in some sense evoke in the moment or access. One thing has to be considered, that no mind will be respected if it does not respect the design of the mind. So what does that mean? That means every human being you have ever seen in your life, due to them having an unknown potential, means they can never judge. You can never know anyone. You cannot identify, you cannot put a changing system into a picture and put it up on your wall of belief. We are advanced communicators. We are right now realizing that a step towards discovery that we are more a mind than a body is the recognition and the upholding. It's when duty and responsibility become crucial elements in the maintenance of the psychological position of the human being. I mean, like, look at this existential condition, guys. Like, don't you find it odd? First of all, it's as if like a lot of the biology is working on its own. Nature is just happening on its own. Okay, now there's a certain conscious factor of it, and this conscious factor of it opens its eyes and it pretty much experiences movement through embodiment, right? So it's a body moving through different locations and going around. And on the experiences that are accumulated by the attention, the prime mover in the moment, as man walks through many stories throughout the day, eventually the wonder and the unknown is space for new stories. I feel that unless a person finds contentment with the unknown, they will be afraid to hold language. They will be afraid to use it. It's as if this important thing that I noticed, that there was a time in my life where before I could speak, I needed to have sentences behind my eyes kind of like there first. Like there needed to be a language needed to come first, then imagery could be evoked. Right? So I noticed a sort of artificialness in my thinking, believe it or not, at a certain time of my life. So then I realized, then it shifted. Then my life shifted where my mind would have more imagery, as if behind my eyes I would see movies, right? Like a film, you know? And as I would see this film, then language would be ascribed to what image I would choose to vocalize. So that's what I'm saying, that the relationship shifted. On some level, words, you got to take them playfully, and Aristotle said it's a sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. You got to take language playfully because it cannot ever be the absolute. It is, as far you can say, it can be poetic, a poetic reach towards clarity, but that ultimate clarity, I find, is an experiential resolution. That means the experiencer of language is not a linguistic creature. That means thoughts are masks. Your real face is not the mask. The stories that we tell ourselves are ways that in the moment, based on our energy levels, we are masking and containing meaning and reality. So what I find is that when something is important enough, the intelligence to complete the task arises. When people can, in some sense, access a sort of presence, just if you care as a being, you are present. You're a present being right now. If you really care for how you're being present, you will automatically see why dishonesty is inefficient. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. That means before anything wrong ever existed, there was a moment of being right. That moment of being right, it gets shifted as you live in life. So you forget about your rights, and in some sense you're looking at the competitive mindset just creates a field of opposition. So in some sense, what I'm saying is we have to navigate consciously what has been a very long unconscious process of development. And language is the true awakening. We awoke into the linguistic simulation. We are creatures that found a way that the sounds we make have meaning and can transport meaning. Literally, language for me, communication between two people, it's like an airport where vision from one airport in one country goes to another airport in another country, or you can say another inner dimension. Language is a bridge between the inner dimensions of human beings, and the reason we have inner dimensions because the motivation of life is ultimately arising from a multidimensional value. And I don't know what's going on with construction outside, guys, but guess we gotta endure this noise, you know? This talk features the construction occurring on the surface of this planet. You know, there was a time I had this idea that every person in civilization there should be a law, like this playful law, that penalizes every person who wears clothing that is just one straight color. So every person has to have different clothing with different colors. So every person in the city is dressed in different colors. Imagine like there was a global kind of community. And so the idea, what I mean by the idea is that a sort of declaration of the embrace of the new, but with a realization that the new must be conscious of the past. You see, not be defined by the past, but to be conscious of it at least, as if like before you sleep at night, just remember your ancestry, remember your lineage, remember even your genetical lineage. I find that the word life and death, the countercultural interpretation of those concepts, would be to be awake and to be asleep. Really, death is kind of strangely similar to sleep, but it is also a sort of awakening. It's like the most important event of a lifetime is how that lifetime or how the pilot in that moment navigates beyond their plane of existence. The ancient rishis saw it as a sort of with their breath, you know? And there's so many ways you can find an elemental exit beyond this plane of existence, but mainly what I find it lies beyond our eyes is really non-dual space being aware of itself. So really intelligence, I don't consider materiality to be the evidence of it. I find that subjectivity to be the evidence of it. That means it's like we can't find out what consciousness is. Like in neurology, there's the hard problem of consciousness and the easy problem of consciousness. And because we cannot, there's a sort of mysterious factor, there's an unknown factor. That means for the first time, the whole system's strength of knowledge is being tested. So when we reach an unknown moment, there comes a fascination, you know? Like I remember seeing, guys, this incredible video of Neil deGrasse Tyson and this other scientist, it was like hilarious scientist who was interviewing him, and they were both talking about how if somebody walked on water now, them as scientists would totally just run up and start trying to measure or find some sort of scientific way of explaining that miracle. Will Durant says knowledge is the eye of desire and can become the pilot of the soul. I find we can not just pilot objectively, we can pilot subjectively. Once the subjective piloting maximizes, let's say, or amplifies, what's going to occur is a new geometrical language is going to develop. What that means is man is going to have more of a crystallized relationship with how patterns emerge in the world. And so this crystallized relationship will inevitably find out a common denominator. So it's like we're just waiting for that one moment where the species realizes it's all it's got. And when that moment comes, I think the civilization will require a new design. So what does that mean? That means either the old world got it right, or if it didn't, something new will happen. And so the freedom for novelty is as crucial as the freedom of the continuity of the ancient. So we have to begin caring for the minds of human beings. If you just see bodies, 8 billion people on the planet, oh my God, overpopulation, we freak out. But if you see 8 billion minds, and if these 8 billion minds had resources, had an efficient vision, had a sort of recognition that the human endeavor is not meaningless, that you have to generate the meaning, that there's no longer a truth to find, but a truth to create. And perhaps that is the most divine action, even from all those audiences in the world whose eyes have opened through Abrahamic context. I will tell you, is creation not the most divinest thing? Is creation not doing what God did? So novelty has of course an incredible value, but it's an infusion of the past. With the unknown future in some sense. I'm going to do something, guys, I do in these talks. It's called a quote tunnel. And I just go on a web page and I find a certain theme or a certain person, and I read a bunch of quotes on that web page. It's just to open, just to give access to other viewpoints, to the audience. Okay, so I'm just going to look up alien quotes, and hopefully it doesn't bring the movie. Alien quotes. Let's see what Google brings. Okay, here. I think I found a page that is not relevant to the movie. Okay, here. So guys, we can at least see the concept of alien, how it was approached by various minds. So I'm just going to go start this quote tunnel. Franklin D. Roosevelt says, "Let us never forget that government is ourselves and not an alien power over us. The ultimate rulers of our democracy are not a president and senators and congressmen and government officials, but the voters of this country." Sigmund Freud says, "Obviously one must hold oneself responsible for the evil impulses of one's dreams. In what other way can one deal with them? Unless the content of the dream, rightly understood, is inspired by alien spirits, it's part of my own being." Yeah, so I feel Sigmund Freud is saying something nice here. He's saying that in some sense, you have to be responsible of that which is you, Mahatma Gandhi, he says, for me, every ruler is alien that defies public opinion. Every ruler is an alien that defies public opinion. That's hilarious. Mahatma Gandhi was a conspiracy theorist. No, I'm joking. He says, for me, every ruler is an alien that defies public opinion. Of course, any ideological system that ignores its environment will seem like it's ignoring it, which it is. So anyway, Stephen Hawking, guys, let's go behind, after Mahatma Gandhi, Stephen Hawking entered the room. He says, if aliens visit us, the outcome would be much as when Columbus landed in America, which didn't turn out well for the Native Americans. Stephen Hawking says, to my mathematical brain, the numbers alone make thinking about aliens perfectly rational. The real challenge is to work out what aliens might actually be like. If Mr. Within could give a commentary, I'd be like, what if the aliens are fields of intelligence? So anyways, Will Rogers says, okay, let's pass this one. This one's too off. Okay. He says, this is from John F. Kennedy, let me read it. He says, we're not afraid to entrust the American people with unpleasant... These are quotes from brainyquote.com, guys. He says, we're not afraid to entrust the American people with unpleasant facts, foreign ideas, alien philosophies, and competitive values. For a nation that is afraid to let its people judge the truth and falsehood in an open market is a nation that is afraid of its people. The road continues. Stephen Hawking says, I believe alien life is quite common in the universe, although intelligent life is less so. Some say it has yet to appear on planet Earth. Aeschylus, who's an ancient Greek fellow, he says, everyone's quick to blame the alien. Neil deGrasse Tyson said, I said that if an alien came to visit, I'd be embarrassed to tell them that we fight wars to pull fossil fuels out of the ground to run our transportation. They'd be like, what? That's awesome. Neil deGrasse Tyson says, perhaps we've never been visited by aliens because they have looked upon Earth and decided there's no sign of intelligent life. What are these self-depreciating species as intelligence jokes, guys? I don't get this atheistic movement, man. Neil deGrasse Tyson says, I don't want to be the embarrassment of the galaxy, to have had the power to deflect an asteroid and then not and end up going extinct. We'd be the laughing stock of the aliens of the cosmos if that were the case. Oh, I see how. Okay. Neil deGrasse Tyson says, no astrophysicist would deny the possibility of life. I think we're not creative enough to imagine what life would be like on another planet. Show me a dead alien. Better yet, show me a live one. Noam Chomsky says, the more you can increase fear of drugs and crime, welfare, mothers, immigrants, and aliens, the more you control the people. Okay, oh, Jesus. This quote section should be more theme-oriented, I think. Like, you know, not just word-oriented. All right, let's go, let's go. Just the name Iman, A-M-A-N, this man says multicultural markets are nuanced but not alien. So even, let's open up at least a business approach to it. Oh my God. John Favreau says, if you look at the mythology of aliens, there's a lot about gold. It's about them coming for gold, whether that's a simplification or not. If you think of Chariot of the Gods, there's this recurring theme of gold. Okay. Sam Keen says, everywhere in the universe the periodic table has the same basic structure. Even if an alien civilization's table weren't plotted out in the castle with turrets shaped we humans favor, the spiral or pyramidal or whatever shape periodic table would naturally pause after 118 elements. Interesting. Charles Baudelaire says, for each letter received from a creditor with 50 lines on an extraterrestrial subject and you will be saved. Okay. Nicholas Roeg says, I imagine if aliens came to Earth, they'd actually be quite tall. People seem to get everything right about extraterrestrials with the size, okay? Seth Shostak says some pundits have proposed that the aliens have come here to breed with us. Apparently, too much bike riding or something similar has rendered them capable of reproducing within their own species. But do extraterrestrial infants toddle through your neighborhood? That's kind of this guy's a comedian, I think. Nick Bostrom says discovering traces of life on Mars would be of tremendous scientific significance. The first time that any signs of extraterrestrial life had ever been detected, many people would also find it heartening to learn that we're not entirely alone in the vast cold cosmos. I think this is a good place to end off the tunnel, guys. Pretty much, that's a very important quote, you know, that he says many people would also find it heartening to learn that we're not entirely alone in the vast cold cosmos. Yes, the pursuit of intelligence may be a desire from the reaction to a sort of emptiness. But an alien view can just be said that sometimes it's the unknown communicates to the known, and sometimes the known communicates to the unknown. You know, somebody said it once that it's like prayer is talking to the cosmos, meditation is listening to it. I was like, that's so maybe true. You know? You see, it's not just what we find; it's where we bring the finding and how the finding goes on to live in the collective vision. I find ultimately it's like human beings, yes, we are shapes relating to shapes. But the internal landscape is a freedom that everybody has. The existential opportunity, just a human being being able to be aware of something, that's an advanced, sophisticated level of intelligence. The most important thing is that the world doesn't, the person doesn't sacrifice their greatness to carry an emotional burden which is as temporary as anything else they would do. So what I mean by that is that every day happens once. But as every day happens once, that opportunity of sight is vast. You know, guys, there is something hilarious about the word alien, is that if you take the N away, it's a lie. Sorry, the letter N away, it's a lie. I just feel that when we care for the whole moment, then the mind has freedom to engage. That engagement is necessary throughout the day. There must be an expression threshold and a reception threshold. That means I entertain both. Life is not about just a plan of action. Sometimes it's about experiential journeying, right? So the journey of experience and the clarity of the being to be aware how the projection is occurring. To be honest, the ultimate wisdom in any sort of enlightenment story or anything, like it's just, if you looked at it from a universal kind of viewpoint, you'd see it's literally a creature fascinated by how it cannot see the full scope of itself. And so when it really reaches that moment of enlightenment, it simply sees what it is the light in its eyes. That's how simple the world can be. That means, oh, every person that has been judging another person, they have been judging light entering their eyes. We're judging light, guys. We are the judgment of light, you know? The world cannot be united by one answer, but it can be united by one question. That means questions now serve more than answers. When a system is inefficient, in some sense, you seek an efficiency. Think of it this way. If you don't acknowledge that something is off in your moment for a while, you will become void. So life has to do, a lot of survival has to do with sensitivity. Sensitivity comes down to alertness. Alertness has to do with presence of mind and, in some sense, observance of subjective phenomenology simultaneously arising in the objective landscape. Okay? So we have to treat each other as unknown beings with known minds for now. So what it means is the ultimate resolution is to realize we are limited to our rooms of perception, and regardless of how we see people in our rooms, in our universe, the other is also in a similar boat. And so this vast journey of conscious minds, these army of ships, you know, just in some, this fleet of ships, kind of like, you know, in some sense moving together in the vast oceans of the unknown. The efforts of the conscious mind have to be, it's as if it's like we have to, it's as if, like, let me tell you the state of our civilization right now. It's 2020, I'm speaking, you know. So the state of our civilization right now, it's as if we've brought furniture in a room, but we have not organized it. Do you see? There's many possibilities, but they're not being attempted. There's many modes of ability and the way the world can happen, and it all really has to do with how much the attention is content with what it is. It's like, why do you wear a jacket when it gets cold? You know? Is there a logical reason? You're like, no, it's a sort of chemical reason. From the biological instrumentation comes the melodies of the intellect. And it is getting a bit chilly. It's like respecting your mind before embodiment imposes the laws of meaning. The free will's crystallization is us opening our eyes from the unconscious. I feel that it's kind of strange. You look at the caterpillar, it's like it's a creature designed to experience legs, like just experiencing legs, okay? It has a lot of unnecessary, like too many legs, you know? Like imagine if a caterpillar was the size of a horse, that would be scary, you know what I mean? So this caterpillar, tiny caterpillar, suddenly goes and turns goes into a cocoon, and through metamorphosis, all the cells of the caterpillar die one by one. The whole system dismantles. The elemental realities, sophistication begins to simplify, and it suddenly reaches a point where, when the last cell of the caterpillar dies, the cells of the butterfly emerge, and the cells of the butterfly can be said to be the new. a new, so it's like it takes us billions of years to just have slight modifications and evolutionary shifts, you know, as an ape. But in regards to insect life, that caterpillar like transforms in a short time into a totally different creature. Totally different creature, a creature where its legs are much less than before, but in some sense it has wings. Do you see? So it's as if I thought, how strange. It's like in one way, in one phase of evolution, if we're thinking in regards to the caterpillar, that it was, in some sense, the caterpillar becomes a butterfly, guys. It goes the opposite of its design. So I had this idea, what if we're bodies experiencing ourselves in a world, but when we transit out of this world, it's as if we are it's as if we are bodies that are experiencing minds, then we will be minds that are experiencing bodies. So let me tell you what I think is perhaps in a very playful metaphysical way going on in this cosmos. The same time that the human being is experiencing being the world is also experiencing being the human being. What does that mean? That means the picture on the Sistine Chapel where there was a separation between God's finger and man's finger. This artwork designed, drawn on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo, and so that gap was never there. It's a realization of a sort of codependence of the truth and the illusion. Moriya Oshiba, this like the founder of Aikido, he says, create each day anew. And guess what? The new is alien. And the alien is the emergence of a new pattern unfamiliar to the past. So the past's contentment to be able to embrace the new will be its advancement. So a person doing something new than a person doing something that's been done before, I think there's a value that the world will acknowledge, you know. Some things you do because you feel the world deserves it, you know. The world deserves better, you know. Nature deserves a bit better, you know. Because the nature of our environment defines our psychological position, and if the environment is shifting from a natural kind of scenery kind of thing where it's as if like houses, it's like imagine an alien coming to our planet and its spaceship lands and it chooses to just live in its spaceship as if it's its home, and it never leaves its spaceship. So this alien has entered this planet but has never left to go see what's happening on that planet. Do you see? So it's as if living in a limited boundary. I find that our minds cannot contain what they cannot relate to. You see, the mastery, the ability of, see here, the warrior back in the day who was just, his power came from his ego. He knew when he drew this, he knew when to draw the sword. Okay? But the true master warrior knew when not to draw the sword. And that was the difference, that the mastery of chaos will inevitably lead you to requiring the mastery of order. And the mastery of order has to do with humble dimensions of the person. The humble dimensions are moments of life where the value of life was kind of neutral. It's like innocence didn't have an opinion on its guilt yet. So I find that if we consider ourselves as states of mind, on some level, it's very hard to even entertain this narrative that we're a human being and there are aliens, because what the human being is a state of, it's a state of change. That means you don't have the same body as you had, for example, 20 years ago. You know, you don't have the same ideological position or awareness as you had 20 years ago. It's like there's a totally different sophistication of how reality is, right? So if you as a person are changing, so regardless of, even if an alien comes down, they will also be prone to change. Do you see? So it's as if, like, now this doesn't mean on some level, of course, there are, we can consider dimensions where beings don't change, like Brahma Loka. I'm simply suggesting that it's like if life was a puzzle to be solved, this is how I see the puzzle so far. There is eyes open, there is landscape. As the attention falls on this landscape, there emerges an inner landscape. As the inner landscape arises and gains momentum and speed, eventually the inner landscape will feel it was here first. The mind will feel ever present to itself. Now, when the mind feels ever present to itself, it will feel its free will is limited. So what it means is the ideology of dominant and sort of submissive kind of mentalities of the psychological positions of people in a very complicated hierarchical system of various competitive factors. So it's like, so in this world, I'm saying, rather than using those terms, we can totally see it as the moments of intelligence that have accessed the efficient vision of the moment, and those who have accessed the inefficient vision. And the efficient vision has to do with the kind of effect the person wants to they want their creative effort to cause. You see, it's strangely, every work of art ever drawn was like a domino effect. And when that work of art entered the veins of civilization, it suddenly became a recognition that it has to do with the biological origin of conscious relativity. You know? That means, I'm pretty sure Einstein knew, he wondered, like, okay, he closed his eyes and perhaps imagined himself moving at the speed of light, like in a train of light or something, and moving in a light beam. Now, if somebody asked him, Einstein, when you were having that thought experiment, who was having that thought experiment? The psychology is left to just simple observance of phenomena. That means the observer is constantly getting defined by what it is observing. You know, this is why even Hafiz says the words you speak become the house you live in. The designs impose limit the potential of what can be, unless there is contentment, unless there is freedom, unless the being realizes, after achieving the success of an individual consciousness, it's like, all right, now your civilization is moving towards collective vision. I mean, well, what else can happen? There's 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. So it's like inner realities must find ways of integrating. You know, and of course we have to consider a sort of emotional dimension to reality, which is kind of bad news for the scientifically obsessed. Let me tell you why. Because that means all scientific findings are coming to a fantasy land of a civilization. That means that artist who's drawing something new, that artwork may be the most irrational thing. You know, like I remember when I went to the Museum of Modern Art and I saw an artwork that was just like what it would be, you would say the laziest artist could also draw that. You know, it was literally as if the guy had spilled like a cup of, like, imagine he had a cup of tea, but instead of tea there was paint, and a little bit of that cup of tea spilled on the canvas, and that was the painting. you know. So it was like this, it was kind of strange for me, right? And I realized how it's kind of like everything is art. It's just, is it being acknowledged as art or not? So I came to realize that every person is an energetic expression, and so expression is a natural thing, right? Freedom is actually the law of nature. Because why is the design here? Why is the design aware of itself? It's like this is some next level thing for some ape that was like, scratching its back, I should say chimpanzee at least, yeah. The rise of a new mind through the embrace of a new moment. Humanity has to cultivate contentment. There has to come a balance between chaos and order. The greatest clue that our biological existence gives about our subjective existence, that just like there's a symmetry to the body, there's a symmetry to the embodied thought. And so the symmetry to the embodied thought, as I say, it's the kind of arising of the dualistic dimension. And the dualistic dimension means that the value is divided. So what that means is there's a point in this one line of the living that's occurring, right? There's a division of psychological value. And I just find that speech is miraculous. I mean, imagine we take somebody, a young child who knows how to speak, like a 5-year-old child, and that 5-year-old child travels, and there's like a very primitive civilization that doesn't know how to speak yet, and that child just in front of that primitive civilization, kind of still in the cages of their silence, where they haven't evolved into sophistication of language yet, and that child just starts talking to those unevolved kind of people back in that time through as the parent and the child went through the time machine. Imagine in this story. So what I'm saying is that just the child speaking and saying new things and doing actions never before seen are evolutionary efforts. So the thing is, just like the observer effect in science, right, where the observer influences the result, I think the extraterrestrial will influence our perception. That means whatever phenomenology we see, there is a suggestion that it's like from the eyes of the alien landing on Earth to make contact. It's like it's having an influence on it's an observing having an influence on what it's seeing. So what it means is pretty much finding contentment with various states of mind. And I find there's various great joys. I call them honorable joys in life. Okay, one is confronting strangely your fears. And when you confront your fears, you realize fear is one side of the coin, and the other side of the coin is desire. You see, fear and desire are closely related. You can say desire is what what someone wants. Fear is what someone wants to get away from. There's still desire in the background. As various archetypes lead to a sort of crystallization that liberates the consciousness from that subjective mode, the mind becomes, the best way I could say, becomes a playful friend. That means I respect the unknown. So moments that I notice certain things, it's as if you have to respect the world if you want the world to remain here. It's strange, but what we don't have in our attention fades. And if the future generations continue the language worship to a degree where the true presence of civilization is being ignored, well, it's as if a civilization couldn't gather and create an efficient system, then it perhaps never deserved one. So that's the situation. That's that mentality that makes me feel like, okay, like, it's like, what's the value of the light of the candle? Buddha said the candle exists to this light to illuminate other lights. What that means is the inner dimensions of the species, as they arise through a sort of content and gentle and kind of wondrous about design and innovation kind of community, humanity begins to realize that its free will now can also reanimate the value of a certain moment. There's a saying that someone said that it's like, yesterday's enemy is today's friend. That means there's so much change that occurs that it's all about kind of rhythmic abidance with reality's values. And eventually, the extraterrestrial, I consider we got to treat it as playfully as we entertain language. Because the unknown can be anything for knowledge. So I find the person finds eventually there is one, that honesty is the only door, only true way. It's like the pilot that opens its eyes in a plane in the sky has to suddenly trust that reality and just continue. Do you see? So it's like consciousness emerging in a velocity that's in accordance to what the being really is, or how the intelligence really is. So this is that cool mentality of abiding by your nature, that your intelligence is in some sense surpasses your behavior and your communication. It is the inventor of them. I find, at least in my view, I don't see a sort of transmigrating soul. I simply see that there's just, I have an ability to identify with contents of the moment, or I am the whole moment. And I've experienced various times where it's as if like I felt my attention was not limited to my body, because it was being everything that I was aware of in that moment. The space in the room was the space of my mind. Do you see? So was also a space in my mind. So a space for my mind to be. So it's like we need matter to be able to consider thought, and we need thought to consider matter. So the subjective evolution and the objective evolution are pillars of civilization that require to be protected. Imagine a civilization that realize people don't need to be governed, because really if a civilization takes a parental role, which it has, it means you gotta trust the freedom, the ability for the citizen to govern itself. Do you see? So you see, it's like a reverse engineering of the behavioral interactions of people back to a moment where it's as if the human being is being trusted. Now, this kind of civilization is really far away, or maybe in some other parallel dimension it's possible. But I'm saying, like, in another parallel way of seeing it. But I'm just saying it's that communication is its greatest when there is no resistance, and that's when the true being is being there. You know what I mean? Like, your truth is not out. It's like it's no longer a passing breeze of thought. To study the unknown, to study how intelligence has a value, to study the eyes that you have that nobody else does. It is the opportunity of a lifetime to realize that beyond description, it is like the presence of experience here. Language bows to the attention that has found itself. That means a being that is aware beyond the language threshold is a being, I find, that is not afraid of non-duality. It may be still intense for them, but it's not, they're not afraid. The fear eventually transfers to an authentic universal mode. So you can think of it, it's as if like the observer continues. It is now a time that 8 billion creatures start communicating their inner realms and their subjectivity, and they try to do it in the most natural way. When this occurs, the mind of civilization actually returns to nature. It's a sort of evolutionary return to nature, but in the psychology of mankind. That means it's as if there is 8 billion geniuses on this planet. We just have to create more opportunities where that genius can occur. And it has to occur from one inner motivation and one outer motivation. Pretty much it's like the story of consciousness journeying through an unconscious that could potentially be the source of intelligence or the effect of intelligence. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. The sages said there's only two things you can do in this life. You either don't trust the moment and nothing happens, or you trust the moment. And when you trust the moment, life has allowed itself to change. That's where the intelligence becomes rhythmic. Without trust, beyond the archetypal position of the observer, the psyche, it's as if it's impossible. I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's like, how can you? It's like entering another dimension with a blindfold and saying that you see something. It's like impossible. So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Never put worry beyond vision, put vision beyond worry. Terence McKenna said nobody knows enough to worry. So contentment is crucial, but imagine you were your own greatest judge and you were just looking at yourself from like the sky and being like, how would I judge this being that I'm looking at? And you would see that you would judge it in bringing its inefficiency to efficiency, but then true redemption arises from within. Really, if the person doesn't want to get off from the chair, there's no point of pulling them off the chair. That means this is what I realized. You shouldn't tell people not to do things. You should tell people how it would be if they did things. So what that means is it's like somebody doesn't want to get up from the chair and the person, so many people come up to this person and they're like, get off this chair, man. Get off this chair. And the guy doesn't get off the chair. Different people come to this guy with the chair And eventually one person comes that is no longer trying to pull the guy. He doesn't even care about how the chair and the person sitting on it. But in front of this guy who's sitting on the chair, he starts talking about the wonders of moving. He starts saying how I walked to the highest mountains and I flew across seas, I jogged, on hills, of concrete, and various things, right? So this guy on the chair is like, whoa, 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 whoa. Am I missing out by being stubborn in my own belief system? And that's when the guy's like gets up from the chair. This is why the true guru was never, who said it's about giving you an answer. These gurus who gave answers and the disciples were like, okay, we will do this answer. Yes, yes, yes. What is this, robot games? What is this blind worship of language? It makes me, it brings sorrow to me when I see ideological possession. My view, many people have to ask me. Eventually, my vision has led to a point where some people say, what's your view? And I tell them I don't believe in language. And then the conversation stops. Do you see what I mean? We are beyond our communication, but we live through our communication in the moment. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in, and the pilots of consciousness navigate beyond the language threshold as their plane of existence. Your attention will attain a freedom at some point where conceptual value arises with your own sensitivity, life sensitivity of attention. So that's when your mind becomes your teacher. When you actually care for how intelligence is happening in the moment, then you realize it's only a mountain you have to climb. That means every human being is opening their eyes to the world from the beginning. We have to consider we started off from not knowing things and then moved towards knowing things. So every person had a gap, and that gap eventually was filled by the life experiences and the way the structures of the cities of knowledge and the empires of knowledge were built behind their eyes. So anyways, that's crucial to be aware of too. Thanks for tuning in. And the word alien is just the word. The truth of indirect experiential reality is beyond language. Much blessings and namaste.